You're probably observing a holiday this month. There are a bunch, although I'm sure most of us are celebrating the same one, burnout season. Best wishes to those who celebrate. Our calendars and the events on them are a huge part of our lives and our world. They mark the passage of time, they show what we value, they even shape our economies. They can do the same thing in your fantasy worlds, and trust me, that is not nearly as complicated as it sounds. I used to think that building a fantasy calendar was total overkill, the kind of thing that only obsessive GMs do, the ones who have Silmarillion-level histories and lie awake at night musing on the exchange rate for gold pieces between different kingdoms. You know, nerds. Not like me. I'm totally normal. But it turns out you can put together a fantasy calendar in half an hour flat, and it can spark a ton of fresh ideas for other parts of your game too, from flavor and side quests all the way to whole campaign arcs. And if you don't believe me, maybe you'll believe the experts.
Well, I don't know if I'm an expert, although I do have a lot of experience.
I meant the game designers who read the books.
Oh, well, both the 2014 and the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide talk about in-game calendars, so I brought both books. You know what they say, double the books, double the fun.
Do they say that?
Some places.
The main purpose of a calendar, of course, is to track the passage of time. Even if you don't do anything else with a calendar, I think this alone is worth adding to a lot of games. When I run games, I often lose track of how much time has passed during our adventures, and that can be a real limitation if you want stuff to be happening in the world around your player characters. You can literally just grab a real-world calendar like, oh, how about this one? My limited edition fantasy calendar available in my shop now while supplies last. Or you could just use Google Calendar, which is free. But Google Calendar doesn't come with dice, so checkmate. You can then use that calendar to track how much time has passed in the game.
Pick a date to indicate the start of the campaign and make note of the days that adventurers spend on their travels and various activities. The calendar tells you when the seasons change and the lunar cycle.
You can also jot down major events as they happen for later reference. Like on the 12th, Jerry got cursed again. You know, so you can keep your "it's been X days since our last curse" sign up to date. Plus, you'll have a better understanding of how time is actually passing in the game. No more of those moments when you have to suddenly invent a canon reason that the dragon's body fully decomposed in 48 hours. It's an enzyme thing. Draconic enzymes just break stuff down super fast, it's crazy. For some tables, that'll be enough, but you don't have to stop there. Getting creative and incorporating some world building into your calendar can make your setting feel more immersive. When a player asks what time of year it is, what the weather's like, what's going on in the town they're visiting, you could just say it's fall. Sure, technically correct. But you could also say, it's early in the ice season, a time of year the locals call ice dawn. The trees are clinging to their last few leaves, and the villagers place offerings of furs and hot drinks on their doorsteps to ward off the grasping, frost-bitten fingers of the ice dawn lady. That's not just an answer, that's vibes. And suddenly the party is asking follow-ups, like, wait, what's an ice dawn lady? Should we be worried about that?
The 2014 guide suggests all kinds of stuff you could include. New names for weeks or months or seasons, religious and civic holidays, and of course fantastical events like the migration of a magical species or a portal that only opens at certain times.
This is the kind of stuff that makes a world feel lived in, that gives your setting personality and texture. And it doesn't have to be one big lore dump like you're reading a Wikipedia page either. Instead, you can sprinkle it in naturally over time. An NPC invokes the Green Dusk Maiden's blessing over his feast. You have to complete your quest for the magic amulet in time for the green solstice. A heavy snowstorm is blowing in, typical weather for Ice Dusk. Suddenly your world isn't just generic Middle-earth ripoff number 89, it's a unique place with its own seasons, events, and norms. And you don't have to come up with all this stuff on the fly because you've got a calendar. Big brain.
The 2024 guide has added something new though, a warning.
Golly, that sure sounds ominous. You'd better stick around and see what it is right after today's sponsor. Hey friends, today's video is sponsored by Shard Tabletop, a virtual tabletop character sheet, campaign manager, and content marketplace that... Wisteria, no, this is just a regular ad. No costumes, no skits. They want something conversational. Just me talking about how Shard Tabletop has all the tools and content you need to run your game. A whole marketplace dedicated to the principles of Open D&D.
Oh, great. Well, I've accidentally set the pantry on fire, but it's a contained inferno. I need a bucket. Or a scroll of everything's fine, actually.
I can't do this right now. I've been told to talk as if to friends or family. Just my own thoughts about how easy Shard is to use, how it works on any device, stuff like that.
Cool. Can it extinguish a fire?
No, but you can play or GM for free, or subscribe to unlock tons of other content. Subscriptions start at just under $20 a year, which is pretty good as far as subscriptions go, honestly.
Well, I guess I'll just Go then. See you later.
Anyway, use the link in the description for a 3-month free trial Game Master subscription.
The Inferno is uncontained!
Oh god. I'm gonna need a scroll of everything's fine, actually. Okay, back to our ominous warning. What does the 2024 DM's Guide want us to know?
It mentions that using words and formats from real-world calendars makes keeping track of time simple, which can be a good thing. It says, a calendar that uses 10-day weeks or names such as Moon Day and Cold Even is harder for players to internalize, but reminds them that they're in a fantasy world.
I think this is really important to keep in mind. If you go too hard on your fantasy calendar, you might find yourself saying stuff like, on Corkin Day, in the third 9 span of the reaping moon, we celebrate the Festival of Horrors, which is great if you were writing a post-apocalyptic YA novel in 2009, but it's less great if you're expecting your players to remember or understand any of this. In fact, the example calendar provided for the world of Greyhawk in the 2024 DMG is, in my humble opinion, too much. Every day of the week and every month has a unique fantasy name, so a player might ask, what day is the coronation? And you would have to say something like, it's on the 4th day of Patchwall, which is a water day. I know, it sounds like I'm making this up, but this is really what's in the book.
She's right. Unfortunately.
I'm not saying that you can't just reskin a real calendar with new names and use that. But also, I think that's kind of the least interesting way to world build with a calendar. New names are fine, although if you want players to actually use them, I would recommend making them really easy to remember. But I think the more important thing is the concept behind the calendar. If you're renaming a month, what does that name mean? How does it describe or define what happens in that month? Our real-world month names don't really mean anything anymore, but if yours don't either, then why force your players to learn them? It needs to be more than just fantasy Mad Libs if you want it to contribute anything of real importance to your game. To show you what I mean, I'll walk you through the simple fantasy calendar that I created during a 3 a.m. crisis of consciousness this week. Turns out existential dread and exhaustion can be compelling muses. Oh, we're done with the books, you can go.
Don't worry, she doesn't mean it. She's just tired.
My first thought was, if I were the one who named the seasons, what would I call them? What would make sense? What would accurately describe what they're like? Now, I live in Colorado where it's sometimes snowing when you wake up and t-shirt weather by 3 o'clock, but if I imagine living in a place with more consistent weather, I think of it as essentially being 2 halves. Half the year it's warm and half the year it's cold. During the warm half, plants grow, and during the cold half, they can't. So I started with 2 seasons, the green season and the ice season. This also gives you the chance to name an inn the 2 seasons. If that doesn't sell you, I don't know what will. This presented me with a new problem though. I didn't really want to rename all 12 months, but it also feels immersion breaking to me if a fantasy world has a February. I'm not judging you if yours does, I just don't like it for my world. But saying stuff like the 5th month of the green season just feels way too complicated. So I figured I'd better divide my 2 seasons into halves. After all, spring is not as green as summer, fall is not as cold as winter. If you divide each season into the beginning of the season, or the dawn, and the end of the season, or the dusk, you end up with these sort of sub-seasons, green dawn and green dusk, ice dawn and ice dusk. And no, that doesn't count as 4 seasons, how dare you. Now the year is essentially divided into 3-month quarters. So you can say the 3rd month of green dawn or the 2nd month of ice dusk, and you feel a lot less like you need to start counting months on your fingers. I also love how easy these names are. Once you've heard the explanation, you can hear the word green dawn and you'll remember what it means. The dawn of the green season. That's basically spring. It's a name that contains the information you need to understand it, like owlbear or fireball or prestidigitation. It's when you upload a pretzel to the cloud. What's so hard about that? Since this calendar is entirely built around seasons, it makes sense to use solstices and equinoxes to mark the changes. The green equinox marks the start of the green season, while the green solstice marks the middle, and the same for the ice season. That's an easy way to distribute major holidays throughout the year. You might be thinking, Ginny, this all sounds fine, but it doesn't sound very fantasy. It sounds like you're just rebranding real-world seasons. But you've forgotten one very important thing about me. No, it's not that I always carry a sword. I don't know how anyone could forget that. It's that I will always jump at any chance to write in a spooky nature lady. She is a nature spirit that takes many forms, and each form has its own demands. Holidays are focused on appeasing these demands. The green season is celebratory and joyful, and the spirit is generous. Her first form is the Green Dawn Child, basically a magic toddler with godlike powers. Curious, playful, sticky hands, you get it. The festival at the Green Dawn Equinox is all games and sports, and if you're thinking, Ginny, is this just fantasy field day? Yes it is. But it's not for you, it's for her. The people know that in this form, she's nourished by laughter and play, and they have to feed her well if they want a bountiful green season that year. Green dusk is her hot girl summer phase. The playful child grows up into the maiden, and now she's all about community and connection. It's common to marry during this time in hopes that the Green Dusk Maiden will bless your union. Yes, she literally feeds off the power of friendship. But don't worry, it's about to get a whole lot less warm and fuzzy. Next comes Ice Dawn, and she is done being cute. No more playful mischief or whimsical matchmaking. The maiden has been replaced by the Ice Dawn Lady, who feeds on warmth. When a traveler freezes to death, it's said that the lady stole the very warmth from their blood. On particularly cold nights, people leave offerings of warm blankets and furs outside their homes, because if the Ice Dawn Lady can't get warm on her own, she'll happily slit you open and snuggle up like Luke Skywalker in a tauntaun. By the time Ice Dusk arrives, let's just say our spirit has seen better days. She has withered into the Ice Dusk shade, and boy is she hangry. Of course, the people are hungry too. Their food stores are really starting to feel the strain by this point in the ice season, but they know that the shade has to feed in order to be reborn as the Green Dawn child. Townsfolk build a communal bonfire every night and toss in offerings of food to feed the shade, because if she's still hungry, the townsfolk are very much on the menu. I know I made it sound very fancy, but this is a pretty simple framework. 2 seasons, 4 quarters, 4 holidays, 4 spirit forms that need to be appeased. So we've got our calendar, we've got our spooky lady with 1,000 vibes, and now you're thinking, what do you do with all this? I am so glad you asked, because this is where it really gets good. Obviously, I'm not gonna spend 20 straight minutes explaining the whole spirit cycle to my players. That is not what this is for. Instead, I'm gonna use it as a built-in resource for flavor, events, quests, even whole campaign arcs. Let me show you just a few examples of how I could use a simple calendar like this in my game. Need a deadline? Great, perfect time to bring in a little flavor from my calendar. The prophecy says the task must be done before the green season ends. Or maybe there are some planar portals that only open on solstices and equinoxes, but our spooky lady is in charge of opening them. Since she changes forms throughout the year, players will need a different sacrifice in order to open the portal depending on when they visit. The Ice Dawn Lady might demand a freshly slaughtered cow, while the Green Dawn child would settle for 3 gummy bears and a really good knock-knock joke. Need some filler or a downtime session? Maybe the party rolls into town just in time for the Green Dawn equinox. And oh look, it's mandatory fun time. Everything is decked in flower garlands and children are running rampant and being given way too many sweets. We've got festival games, races, sports. It's delightfully low stakes. Well, until my players get involved in a drinking contest and suddenly it's high stakes for their dignity. It can be great inspiration for quests too. Maybe they show up during Ice Dusk and the vibe is very different. A panicked mother begs the party to find her missing child before the shade takes him. To free the child, the party has to fight off shadelings, ghosts that have been reskinned to deal cold damage. Or maybe they have to find something else for the shade to eat instead. And of course, my players don't need to be discovering this calendar for the first time during play. It can be part of the world building that they reference when they create their character. Maybe the nature spirit is a warlock's archfey patron, and their eldritch blast deals different damage types depending on the spirit's seasonal form. Maybe a nature cleric takes this spirit as a manifestation of their god. If you're wondering how far this can be taken, the answer is the limit does not exist. You want me to create an entire campaign arc? Done. The spirit is corrupted, and if the players don't fix it by the end of the year, she'll be trapped forever in her final and most terrible form, the Ice Dusk Shade. But the corruption is spread across all of her forms. Each season, the players have a chance to learn about what the current form needs, and then conduct the purifying ritual at the equinox or solstice. But each time she takes on a new form, the players are taking on a new and greater challenge. I now have a quest arc with a clear deadline that grows in difficulty as the players grow in power. It even has a natural, goofy fun times to dark gritty horror arc built right into it. Not to toot my own horn, but I think that's a pretty fucking good start for a calendar concept born in 30 minutes from a sleep-deprived brain. I hope this helps you create your own calendar, or heck, just steal mine if you want. I'm happy to spread the joy of spooky ladies to every table that I can. And speaking of calendars, my 2025 calendar is about 90% sold right now, which means if you've been thinking, I'll pick it up later, you won't. We're really getting into the last chance zone here. If you're a last-minute Christmas shopper in the US, today is the very last day to order and still receive your calendar in time for the holiday. It makes a great gift for the fantasy lover in your life, or for yourself. I'm not gonna judge you. I literally can't, I'm in the computer.